but I'm telling you, man, we've been hit with so much snow that it's unbelievable. I mean, I literally can't get out of my house. Send help if you can.
Those Sasquatches are probably loving that up there.
Yeah,
they love that cold weather. I'm telling you, it's the opposite of what all these people think. They love cold weather.
Woody and I were talking about going up to Yakult Mountain. I bet there's a lot of good tracks up there right now.
Oh, right now you can bet on it.
Get them up and down. But I mean, if it's snowing up there like it is down here, we'd probably get up there and get stuck.
Yeah, because it gets pretty deep fast. Even over on Silver Star, that's a good area too.
Yeah. Silver Star Mountain's a good one. Yeah. I've heard a lot of encounters up there. The last show, I'm telling you, man, we missed you. Wasn't the same.
Well, we'll do it. We'll do it this time.
So on the show tonight, we have Melissa, who had kind of a scary encounter. I want her to tell the story, but from what I gathered from it, it was chasing her car and trying to cut her off. And it made me think of, I was looking on the Bigfoot Evidence blog today, and they were talking about this kid who actually hit one. And he was trying to tell the authorities he hit one, and it caused a wreck. And none of the cops believed him. They thought he hit a deer or something, but he kept saying, no, I hit. They were asking, was it a human? He was like, no, it wasn't human. It was 7-8 feet tall. The damage to his car, I mean, there's substantial damage to his car, and he can't get the authorities to believe that he actually hit one of these things. It made me think of Melissa's story.
That's like there's an encounter from Amboy in your area. The local told me the guy that owned the towing company there in Amboy hit one with his Jeep. I want to say it was in the late 70s. Wrecked the Jeep, and he and a buddy took the Jeep to his garage and repaired it because they said, what are we going to tell the insurance company? But it didn't hurt the Sasquatch apparently that much. It got up and ran off, but it totaled the Jeep.
Yeah, I bet. I can't imagine a more terrifying encounter than actually hitting one with your car, because you hope you can drive off.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and bring Melissa on.
Hi, Melissa. How are you this evening?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Now, prior to your incident, did you have much knowledge about the subject of Bigfoot, or can you tell us about that?
I mean, of course, I had heard of Bigfoot, but it was just a joke. It wasn't real. It was just, I never gave it much thought, really. And actually, at the time I had my experiences, it wasn't until a few years after that I put two and two together and figured out that that's what it was.
Now, how long ago did this happen?
15 years ago, maybe, the first one.
Okay, well, go ahead and start there and tell us what you were doing just prior to the event happening and lead us into that.
Well, the first incident that I had was just audio. It was just vocal. This was in the northern portion of the lower peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
So there's a lot of state land. We lived on 40 acres, and my sister-in-law owned 40 acres across the street, and then my aunt the next 40, and so it was all private for miles. It was private land, and then state land bordered all that. So there was our houses, but basically there was nothing else around for a long time. It was early spring. My ex-husband, my husband at the time, I was sleeping, about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he came and woke me up, and he said, come here, you've got to hear this. And he was kind of freaked out, and he said, you got to hear this. I got up, went to the back part of the house that faced out. There was a sliding glass door. You opened the sliding glass door, and there was probably a quarter mile of woods, and then there was power lines, and then about another quarter mile of woods, and then a lake. From that direction, I'm assuming it was somewhere around the power lines, was this vocalization. Like I said, it was an 1/8 to a quarter of a mile away, and when this thing went off, you could feel it. You could feel the sound hit you. You know what I'm saying?
Can you describe the sound?
Like a roar, scream, screech, all rolled into one. Got real guttural, deep. Whatever this was had an enormous lung capacity. Because, I've told people this before, and I've had so many people, and it really gets me. People say, oh, it was a fox or a bobcat. Well, unless it was about, a 900-pound fox, I don't think so. And And having lived up there for years and years, I've heard fox, I've heard bobcat, I've heard bear, I've heard the elk bugle. Where I was living is actually the elk capital of Michigan. So I've heard elk go off. You know, I've heard everything. This was not it. This was like standing too close to a speaker at a concert, and the sound, you can feel it hit you. But, you know, like, it was huge. It would go off about every 30 seconds or so for over an hour. It was going. And I never thought to record it because I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. Again, I was thinking, what in the heck is this? But it was, you know, like the closest thing I can think of would be, like I heard somebody else say this, the T-Rex on Jurassic Park. But almost that, but even deeper, really. Whatever it was had to be big. And it was just very, very, very powerful. You know, we just basically stood there. We're trying to figure out what it was. I never thought to go, knowing what I know now, if I had heard that again, or knowing what I know now, had I known that then, I would have been out there the next day back by those power lines looking for prints or something. Sure. I might even have got in the car with the spotlight and tried to drive back into the power. I would have done something. But at the time, I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. I was just thinking, I don't know what.
Yeah,
but there's something.
What kind of animal is that?
Right. I think there's a T-Rex back there, you know?
Yeah, that'd kind of keep me out of the woods, I think.
Yeah. So, you know, we didn't know what it was, but it was very unnerving.
Had you ever heard any noises like that before then, or?
No.
So that was the first time?
Yes. And like I said, I had heard all the animals that are around there. I've heard elk bugle and foxes going off, and this, whatever this was, it's really hard to describe to somebody that's never heard it, the power behind the sound.
Right, right.
You know what I'm saying? It's almost impossible to convey that to somebody.
Now, the roar, let me ask you, did it stay sort of a consistent low sound, or did it change in pitch at all? You know, from start to finish? Or, in other words, did it start out low and then go higher, or did it kind of stay the same, or?
No, at the end of it, it was higher at the end.
Okay.
But it was like...
So it sort of ramped up to a higher pitch towards the end.
Yeah, like it started a real deep growl. It was real deep and guttural. And then that would go for a while, and then it would kind of, you know, go from this growl, and then it would into a scream. Okay. And then at the end, it was like, you know. I mean, that's not even close, but it changed in pitch for sure.
Okay. So now you had more instances after that, is that correct?
I had one other incident after that.
Okay. And how long was that after this first sound you heard?
I want to say probably a year or two after we heard these noises.
And did I ask you what time of year it was? I'm sorry.
Early spring when we heard this.
Early spring. Okay.
Yeah. The second one was in the height of summer.
Okay.
It was hot out. I don't know if it was June, July, or August, but it was real hot out. I was coming home from work, and I was coming down, I'm coming down the road, and I was going to take the back way to my house. And to do that, you come down the highway, and you're heading east on the highway, and you make a hairpin turn. And when you make this turn onto a dirt road, you actually, for a couple mile and a half or so, are heading west. You're exactly parallel to the highway that you were on. So I'm heading one way, I make a hairpin turn, and now I'm paralleling the highway I was just on, but now I'm on a dirt road.
Right.
And there's probably, I don't know how many feet in between the highway and the dirt road is a cedar swamp. And as you're going down the dirt road, you start heading off a little bit. That cedar swamp widens and widens, and the distance between you and the highway gets farther and farther. So it's like a big triangle, kind of. So I'm coming down the highway. It was probably 5:30, 5:15, somewhere in there. I make this hairpin turn, and I could see the sun was shining. So I could see the highway. and I could see through the cedar swamp, but I couldn't see in the cedar swamp because it was dark. Like I could see the sunshine on the other side, but inside the cedar swamp it was dark. So I'm driving along, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. My first instinct was that it was one of our neighbor's horses had gotten loose, because I guess that's the only thing my brain could reconcile was moving that fast through a cedar swamp, because it was fast, really, really fast. As I'm driving, and I'm not going very fast because I'm on this dirt road, and it's the summer, and it's just washboard bumps, and it's terrible. And I'll mention I was in a Geo Tracker with a soft top. Okay, so I'm going down this dirt road, and I'm not going very fast. I caught that movement out of the corner of my eye, and I slowed down. I turned to look, and I caught a profile, and I could see head, shoulders, arm back, and between the legs. So whatever it was upright. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not a horse. I just saw it for like 1,000, 2, and I could see the legs, upper thighs, thick. Like, as big around as my big, huge.
Right.
The arm back, as it was running, the arm came back in a bent position, super long arm, hand on the end, fingers splayed, I could see fingers. Coming up to, I didn't see the torso a whole lot, but I saw shoulder and the head, huge head. From what I could tell, flat face. I didn't notice any protruding facial features, but again, he's in the dark, so I'm not seeing, a lot of features. Definitely hair. You could see hair bouncing, kind of moving as it ran. Not real long hair, but enough hair that you could see it. No neck, really. Big, huge head, and I couldn't tell. It looked to me like it was just more of a rounded head than a coned head, but I'm looking at it from the side, so, I don't know. I just seemed to have more of a rounded head. Probably it was eye level with me, but I'm in the road, and the cedar swamp goes down like almost like a ditch or a divot between where I'm at and the highway. It goes down into the cedar swamp, and so this thing had to be at least 8.5 feet tall to be eye level with me up on the road in my car. I have no idea what it is, but it's freaking me out. So I turn to look where I'm going, because I don't want to go off the road. I'm gawking at this thing, and I don't want to go off the road or another car comes or hit a tree or whatever. So I glance at the road for a minute, turn back, gone. So now I'm like, I don't know if it stopped or if it was going fast enough it got ahead of me and it just kept running and now it's far enough ahead of me that I can't see it, or if it stopped and crouched down, or if it just stopped behind a tree. I don't know, but it's gone. So now I'm in this Geo Tracker with a soft top, driving down the road. I see this thing. Now I can't see this thing. And at the direction he was running, it was running. And the direction I was going on the road, I'm going to run into it. He's going to run right in front of me. Okay, this thing, sorry, it still freaks me out. This thing could have ripped that car open like a tin can, jerked me out of there, and popped my head off, and there would have been nothing I could have done about it. I'm freaked out because I'm thinking, if he didn't stop, whoever, actually my mind at the time was whoever, is going to cut me off. They're running next to me because they're trying to catch up because they're going to cut me off. That's the only thing I could think of. Why else would somebody be sneaking around running through the cedar swamp, I was really, really, really scared. I kept going, and I picked up my pace as much as I could without losing control on the dirt road, because that was the last thing I wanted to do, was crash and be stuck out there. But I made it all the way back home, and I never did see it again. About the next mile and a half, I was terrified that that's what it was doing, was it was going to come back out and try to cut me off or jump on top of my car, or I was thinking the only thing my brain could figure was there's a person that wants to do something. Why else would you be sneaking around the cedar swamp, Having gone back, looked at these experiences and done some research, looking at Patterson-Gimlin film and things like that, I'm almost positive that this was Bigfoot. Had I known that then, I probably would have been just as scared. I don't know, but I don't know. Now I'm thinking more than likely it probably stopped and hid behind a tree, or perhaps even maybe there was a younger one there and it was running to catch up to the younger one to tell it to get down, or, something like that.
How fast do you think you were going, Melissa?
When I first made the hairpin turn, I wasn't going real fast. I was just picking up speed, 15, 20 miles an hour. I mean, you can't really do more than 25, 30 on that road anyway in the summertime because it's horrible. And when I noticed him running next to me, probably doing between 15 and 20. And I had my windows down. I didn't have the top down, but I had the windows down. And I do remember hearing one snap. So I don't know if it stepped on something or whatever, but I did hear one crack when it was running. But I had seen it before that. The crack isn't what made me turn. I had seen it out of the corner of my eye before that.
Well, it's a pretty good description, and it definitely fits with, the Sasquatch in the Patterson film. And the flat face, that's a very particular feature. People see protruding faces or whatever, then I don't know if they're seeing a Sasquatch, because a Sasquatch has a very flat face and not a protruding nose.
Yeah, I didn't see anything protruding from the facial area at all. It just, it looked like, you could tell there was a face there,
Right.
Obviously it wasn't, void, but there was nothing, it looked enough like a person, I thought it was a person. Put it that way.
And following a car like that is something I've heard a number of times, cars being paced. Sometimes they run right close to a car looking in, I guess, maybe to get a look at what's in the car, or, maybe just to get a better look at it.
Oh my God, I had a stroke. I was having a stroke as it is. If that thing would have looked in my car and I would have saw that, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now.
It's not something you go out expecting, that's for sure.
No, and that's the thing too. I wasn't looking for it. Like I said, Bigfoot's a joke, right? They're not real. That's stupid. But now, the thing I hate worse than anything was somebody goes, well, it was something else. Don't try to tell me what I saw. You didn't. You know what I mean?
And that's what bothers me too. There's a lot of people that make comments about something that someone else has seen. And how do they know? They weren't there.
Right.
And if they've never seen anything themselves, well, what gives them equal say in a conversation when you've seen something and they haven't? That's their opinion, and, they're welcome to their opinions. But when it comes to giving weight to what somebody says, you were there, you saw it. I saw him.
Right.
Wes and Woody saw him. We know what we've seen. Don't tell me what I saw. I was there.
Right. It wasn't a squirrel, okay? I saw what I saw. I've had people tell me that, it was a squirrel jumping from tree to tree. Really?
Yeah, 800-pound squirrel.
Right. and even today, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Well, I saw this alien looking in my bedroom window," I might not believe them inside, but I'm not going to tell them they didn't see what they saw, because I know what that feels like.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you didn't see an alien in your window. I wasn't there. Maybe you did.
That's been done way too many times. I know the first time I found tracks, I was 14. A buddy and I found 3 sets of tracks. Another friend's father went back, took a bunch of pictures, told us what it was. We'd never heard the word Bigfoot before in 1972. And, of course, we were wound up. I ran home and was telling my parents and sisters, and they laughed. Come on, we found tracks. Another friend's dad took the pictures. We're just saying what we found. We're not saying what it is. We just said, and still got laughed at. So, again, if somebody wasn't there, didn't see it, how can they really comment on it?
And pacing your car in a cedar swamp at 15 miles an hour is pretty amazing.
And your first impression was it was a horse. So something that size moving quickly,
right.
Certainly not a smaller animal. That's your first impression. It's usually pretty correct when your first gut reaction to something, you get something you're comparing it to, you're familiar with, like something the size of a horse. Well, I think a Sasquatch is pretty comparable to the bulk of a horse.
I think it's like what you always say, Will. Like your brain tries to rationalize what you're seeing, and so you kind
fall
of
back on what you already know, and you try to fit it in. Your information that you have as best you can.
Right.
I was just going to say, one of the things that is very frustrating for somebody that's had one of these experiences is you tell somebody, and you say, well, this thing was really big, and people go, oh, yeah. It's like, no. I don't have words to explain to you the body mass that I was looking at, okay?
They don't understand.
I can tell you it was a football player on steroids, or I could tell you it looked like Hulk Hogan, but 10 times bigger. But you're not going to comprehend the girth, the width, the size, just the body mass on these things. You can't comprehend it unless you've seen it.
I used to hunt deer and elk and had a number of rifles, hunted with my dad, and standing in front of two of these things in less than 15 feet, I still can't think to myself what size of caliber would knock one of those down, just because of the sheer thickness of the body.
Yeah.
From front to back, the big male that I saw was at least 3 feet thick, from chest to back, and then the width of the shoulders, was massive. Again, you're right. You can't describe that to somebody.
Yeah, there's nothing else on this earth to compare it to, unless maybe an elk grew ginormous arms and legs and got up and started walking around.
Right.
The body mass is just, and when people say, I never smelled anything, but when people say they've smelled them, I can believe, because this is like if you have a 900,000 pound horse or cow or deer or anything or elk, it's going to smell like a big animal, just that animal smell. You know what I'm saying?
Let me throw something out about smell so people understand this. And I've been chatting with an anthropologist lately about this, and he agrees. They found that, with gorillas have scent glands in their hands and in their armpits, and when they get excited, they excrete strong odors. So they don't do it all the time. And over the years, talking to thousands of people in the last 40 years, and something Renee DeHinden and I talked about often, we came to the conclusion that about maybe one in every 10 encounters, there's a smell. And it could very well be, you have to counter in things like, let's say during the summer, or through the winter, the animals have kind of a lean diet. Berries come out, all of a sudden they eat them, or what happens? They get diarrhea. So either they have blood in their fur and it's rotting, that could account for smell. Some of the body odor, if they're wet, they have diarrhea and it's on their hair. Or if they get excited, and if they're like the other higher primates, they excrete this odor. So it doesn't have to be in every case. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
You see, that's what I always thought, that it was either an at-will thing, or it just happened when they were, like you said, excited or agitated or afraid or something like that. Because there are so many stories that people said, I walked right up on this thing and I was sleeping, I didn't smell anything.
Yeah, the two I encountered, I didn't smell anything, and I was standing right there close in front of them. But they weren't excited. I'm sure they probably heard me coming through the tree limbs, so it wasn't that big a deal.
Do you think that possibly they could do it at will if they wanted to use that as an intimidation?
Well, I think if they're going to use intimidation, like most primates, and again, I go back to this term demonstration. Now, whether it's a scream, a mock charge, thrashing brush, I could give you lots of examples people have told me. It's more visual and maybe vocal than scent. Scent would be more, I don't really know, I wouldn't say territorial, but it could be along those
emotional
lines.
Abuse.
More of an emotional kind of outlet than a purposeful thing.
Mike from the Siege of Honabi, he was telling me that they produce, he theorized that they produce that smell when it's an emotional, like you were saying, well, it's a fear or it's an excitement. Anger. It's not that they stink all the time. It's something he thought they produced.
I've heard accounts of people that say, these accounts where people say I was walking in the woods and maybe they'll say I got the feeling I was being watched and I started to get a little nervous and then I got hit with the smell and I automatically thought I got to get out of here. So I didn't know if maybe it was a type of non-aggressive way of them saying, get out of here. Because if you come too much closer, then I'm going to have to get
I think in that case it's probably more of it's a response, because I think these things look at us as a very dangerous opponent because of past encounters with humans. Humans are, and I've said this before, the two things, people always say that the main thing that brought us to the top spot in the animal kingdom on the planet is our intelligence, but they also forget about our aggressiveness. And hand in hand, those are the two things that brought us to where we are. And that's why animals are afraid of us predominantly, because they know we are a very aggressive species, and the Sasquatch is no different. So I think in a case like that, and I had that experience one time, we got a report out by Stevenson in the Columbia River Gorge. And this was out by the fish hatchery out there. People said they saw this creature. So two of us went out to look. We hiked up this road, and it was a rainy day, so the air was fairly clean. We walked along quietly. Then all of a sudden, it was like walking into a wall. This horrendous odor. It was overpowering. We almost threw up from gagging. So we walked out of it. We walked up the road a little ways, and we came back, and it was gone. So my thinking is that it was a response to our presence. Maybe that the creature was there doing whatever, and that was an emotional response to a dangerous animal.
Right.
Like we would, running from a bear or something like that.
Right, I know, I see it, but I think, like you said, though, if you came close enough to one that was wet or sick or something like that, you would smell it regardless.
Yeah, I do think those are some of the cases. Sure, if they're wet or there's something in the hair that's rotting or what have you, but I think those do account for some of the cases where a risk smell is reported. But on the other hand, it's also that, body reaction too.
Right.
It just kind of depends on a case-by-case basis.
I know because I've listened to enough of your shows that a couple of them I can't get on my phone when I'm walking the dog, by the way.
Uh-oh.
It says it doesn't support this format. I'm like, dang it! The Siege at Hanubia or whatever that is, that's one of them. I'm like, darn it! I've listened to enough to know, after Wes and Woody's experience and some of the other experiences I've heard, people with fairly aggressive experiences. I'm wondering if you think, because I think these guys are very dangerous. I think they can be very dangerous, and they would never want to go be careful what you wish for kind of thing, like you said.
Exactly.
But do you think that there can be, like, they're almost like people, like there's some of them that are just not, or you think they're just across the board? They're all dangerous because they're wild animals. I get that. But do you think that there are some in some areas or some tribes or whatever they are extremely more aggressive than others?
Oh, certainly.
Because I've heard stories of them actually helping people and stuff sometimes.
Well, now here's something to consider too, and I'm going to put this out in my next book. We may have more than one species.
Yeah, I think that too.
One is what I call a Sasquatch. The other one is not a Sasquatch. Everybody lumps everything and has done this now for decades under one term, Bigfoot. I don't think all of them are one species. In Australia, for instance, there are two different types there, so it goes to show that there could very well be two here as well.
Yeah,
so some of those may be completely different than what I call the true Sasquatch, which is predominantly here in the Northwest.
Yeah, see, I agree, because some people, like you said, some people describe him as having more of a monkey face. Some people describe him as looking exactly like people. I mean, some of those, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but some of those sketches that were done in David Paulides' book with the witnesses, I mean, some of those look really, really human,
Right, but I don't think you can't lump that all under, variation within a species. That's,
right.
Where, variation is, hair color and, whether your earlobes connect or don't connect, but having a nose or not having a protruding nose is not, that's too much. That's different species at that point.
Right, and I've heard that people say that I've heard the ones more towards the East Coast and like the Florida skunk ape type thing tend to be more aggressive than the ones in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, that's a generalization that I've heard, but again, I think the skunk ape is a totally different thing than what is
a third variety in itself.
Yeah, than what's in the Pacific Northwest. And
exactly.
The ones in the Pacific Northwest, obviously the ones living in a cooler climate, seem to be a lot bigger and
much
more
bigger,
body mass than the ones like the orang pendek is supposed to be really, really small. well, I live in warm weather, you know. There's definitely different species, I think.
Yeah, there are plenty of differences to look at to put that thought together.
If that's the case, then the Yeti living in the Himalayas has got to be huge.
I mean, yeah, I don't really know enough about the Yeti, but that's certainly interesting. And there's worldwide there could be, you know, the thinking is there could be 4 or 5 different species of these relic hominids, which kind of is a better balloon term, I think, than Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, right.
I never liked that term just because so much derision was attached to it. So I'll use the term Sasquatch, or now I kind of like the term relic hominid, but
right. I'd prefer to use Sasquatch rather than Bigfoot.
Yeah, I do too. Even though it's an anglicized term in itself, it still doesn't have all the silliness attached to it that Bigfoot does.
Right.
Not as much anyway.
Hey Melissa, out of curiosity, how do you listen to the show?
Well, usually I listen to it on my phone when I'm out walking the dog. I'll put it on. Like on YouTube or something, or? Yeah. I think I pull it up on YouTube on my phone, or sometimes my tablet. But every once in a while, you guys will put on a show and they'll say this, you know, is not supported by the YouTube user. Doesn't have this format supported, or something like that. You'll have to watch it on your PC.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah, if you go and download the app Stitcher on your phone or on your tablet, you can download it if it's an Android or Apple. But if you download Stitcher and then search for us in there, you'll find us, and you should be able to get all the shows. You won't have any format. Sometimes YouTube doesn't like some of the music I put on there, and so that's why. I think on the Siege of Honabi, it was the music I was playing with the gunfire going off. Let me ask you this, Melissa, and I know we're getting down on time, but I wanted to ask you, so how did this whole experience affect you of actually seeing these things? You know, they're out there. You know, it's kind of like you were saying before, because I had the same opinion. I always thought Bigfoot was kind of a joke until it, you know, it's all fun and games until it happens to you. But how did it kind of change you? Yeah. How did it affect you? How did this whole experience kind of affect you and affect your life?
I have to say one of the things, and this might not be something you hear every day, but having looked back on it and figuring out what it is, what I believe it was, in a weird kind of way, it gave me almost like self-confidence, because I'm to the point now where if I tell somebody and they don't believe me, or they try to tell me I saw a squirrel or something, I don't care anymore. I saw what I saw. You can like it or you can lump it. Where I used to have problems with, I wouldn't want to tell anybody because they'd think I was crazy. I don't care anymore if you think I'm crazy. And that's transferred into other aspects of my life. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But that's what it was. So
yeah, I can understand, because I was the same way as a young guy. You know, for a number of years. At first, we wouldn't talk about it except amongst ourselves who'd seen tracks and things like that. And after a while, I just said, "Well, to hell with it. I know what I saw, and if somebody doesn't like it, too bad."
And I've told people, you know, don't try to tell me what I saw, because you don't know. You weren't there. You don't know what I saw.
And you know, there are at least, for every one person that comes out and tells what they saw, there are at least 10 more people that will never say anything. And it's a darn shame, because they have every right to say what they saw and tell their story. And for somebody to laugh, that's just stupid. You know, if they weren't there, what are you laughing at somebody for? You weren't there, you didn't see it, you don't know what that person experienced. So I think that's just nonsense, doing that kind of behavior. You know, if you got a story, tell it.
And like I said, I look at other people's stories. If somebody tells me that a Bigfoot looked in their bedroom window and waved at them, I'm going to believe them, because you know what? I wasn't there. So,
yeah, and there's a hell of a lot of stories out there. And it's pretty hard to ignore that.
You know what gets me too? Since we're on this, so might will go off, right? What kind of gets me too is, I know there's other, I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist, and I'm not a, you know, whatever. There are species out there that have been identified solely on tracks, because they found a track, they didn't know what it was, they classified it or whatever, and I don't know why they won't do that with the Sasquatch footprint.
I think for so long after, Green and Hendon and those guys back in the late 50s through Patterson getting his film, I think through that time period, people were willing to believe it either way. They were waiting for good, solid proof. And then after that, that's when, the nonsense brokers started making their appearance. People who they'll love to have attention no matter what it is they say or how ridiculous. So people who were waiting to see which way the winds were sort of blowing on the subject got really turned off, and that's where a lot of the jokes came in. And then, of course, the media and everybody always jumps on that part of it and wants to make it a big fat joke instead of listening to all the really good people. There are a few, a really small few numbers of people out there that will do these hoaxes. And they're ridiculous. There's a few right now that are going on that I think are absolute crap that's going on. People claiming this stuff is real, but it's nonsense. But the vast majority of people that have had encounters like yours are good, solid witnesses. There's nothing wrong in what they're saying. They have, and oftentimes, good evidence. And why the nonsense part of it persists, it baffles me.
Right, because
why we even allow that to continue?
If you've got 10,000 people that say they've seen this, 10,000 people say, I saw you kill this guy, you'd be in jail. If you had 3 people that say, I saw you kill this guy, you know what I'm saying?
Usually only one, if you get one.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If it was tried in court of law, the case would have been solved years ago.
Well, you know what, I do think that we have, in the last, I don't know how many, maybe 10 years, maybe more, but I do think in the last few years, there are more credible scientific people willing to come into this and take a look at it, like your John Bindernagels and people like that, and that are honestly, I think it's getting less stigmatized for a professor in a university or a legitimate scientist to come out and say, I want to look at this and not have to worry about losing his, tenure or whatever. I think it's getting to that point where more and more people that the other scientific community will take more seriously anyway are starting to step up and come into it. I think that's a good thing.
I think even more so, it's better that the general public is more willing to listen and discuss it, not so much in a humor-related environment. They're willing to look at it in a serious manner, and we're finding that with our audience.
That is very true.
And I think once that happens on a really big scale, then the scientific community really doesn't have any option at that point. They need, because the bulk of people are willing to accept it, they have to start paying attention.
Right. And it kind of drives me crazy when somebody says, man, I heard this, this guy came out and he told his story about he saw this Bigfoot and, he gave all these details, and it was just amazing because, the guy was a sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, great, I'm not a sheriff, but I saw the same thing, but, I understand they're trained in observation and things like that, but and it's good that these people are coming out and saying that. I'm not saying it's not good, but it drives me nuts when people take this person's word for it over that person's word for it because this person is a policeman or is a doctor or is a whatever.
And their powers of observation aren't necessarily any better than anyone else's.
Right.
Right. But because they have a badge or whatever, automatically.
No, yeah, I agree with you on that, Melissa. It titles mean nothing really.
Especially this subject.
Right. Sure, appreciate you coming on though, Melissa, and sharing your experience with us. God, I don't know what I'd do if I was driving and saw one pacing my car, I can't even imagine what you went through that day.
I went through a heck of a lot less than you guys did, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I would have definitely stroked out if I was in your car and they were creeping up on my car and I was sitting there. I would have been like inside the glove box.
Yeah. At least they were in a car. I walked through the tree line, pushed my way through some brush with just a .22 in my hands, and there was one standing right in front of me. And then another one came off from behind me.
I can't think of almost any Bigfoot experience that wouldn't scare the crap out of somebody.
Yeah, I haven't heard any that, other than, I've talked to a few people who said, well, I was riding my bike on the road or walking on here, and I looked across the field and I saw this thing. There's plenty of stories like that, but it's always the close-up and personal ones, that I like, because that's what mine was. So, I can identify with those people pretty closely.
Yeah, if you're close enough to actually see what you're looking at, it's going to scare you. I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you are and how tough you think you are. If you see one of these things close enough, it's going to scare you.
It's an underwear-changing experience.
Definitely. Defibrillator kind of experience.
Exactly.
Brings the ego down a few notches.
Yeah, it does.
You know what? And I know this sounds horrible, because sometimes I do watch, but I don't watch. But that girl on Finding Bigfoot, I so hope one just comes up and just gives her a big old smooch right on the lip. Because, the guy says, well, I saw it and it was 20 feet away, and she'll be like, well, it was probably a squirrel. And I'm like, really?
A squirrel?
Really? A squirrel? Really? That was a big squirrel.
I want to say, I'll take her out and drop her off in a couple of areas I know and come back and tell me you saw a squirrel out there.
Yeah, and you know what? I've gone on her Facebook page, and I've said, if you really want to see one, you're going about it the wrong way, first of all.
Oh, they're all doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, with the camera crew and
That's
your
the
life.
That's operation I've ever seen.
Yeah, and screaming, you're not going to see one.
No wild animal's going to react to those kinds of stimulus. They won't. It's just a silly perspective on the whole thing.
I just really hope that it happens for her, because, I don't know, it's like the biggest skeptics are the one you hope, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hope you wake up one morning and one's looking in your bedroom window and you just have to go change your underwear.
Have a whole different perspective on life.
It'd be nice if it happened for all four of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Well,
I
sure appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I love your guys' show.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Good story. It's very, very similar to a number of them I've heard before, right there in the Columbia River Gorge, where I just always go back and think of over in that area, where the Hugh Brown story where he was charged. There was another guy over there, and I believe he was a logger who was driving along that same road that parallels the Columbia River near the Bridge of the Gods, and he happened to see something moving next to his truck, and here's this thing pacing his truck, doing about 30 miles an hour, bending down, looking in, I guess, to get a look at him, and he, had a little moment there with himself. And from what I recall of the story, he sped up and the thing kept pace with him. So, that's one of those life-defining moments, I think, where you realize that you're not the top of the food chain.
Yeah, one thing that Melissa said that really caught my attention was you don't realize the size of them. And I remember before when people would talk about Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, how it was 8 feet tall. And I remember thinking, well, if you take a person, and you make them 8 feet tall, that's basically what they saw. And it's not even in the same it's not even the same caliber.
The height, I estimated my height, because I think when I had my sighting, I was about 5'9" or 5'10". And if I held my arm up, which is about 2 feet above my head, that's about roughly the height of the Sasquatch that I ran into, the first one. So I know it was about 8 feet, and the thickness, when people say, oh, it was 200 or 300 pounds, I don't know what they're thinking. What I saw was at least, and I'm saying at least 800 pounds, maybe more. And just to account for that bulk, the thickness, as I mentioned, from the front of the chest to the back, let alone the width, from shoulder to shoulder. They just can't grapple with that mass.
Yeah, it's definitely a shocking moment. I know
you guys ran into.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's just when you see the size of them, you're just like, it's hard to put it into words.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know how you convey that to somebody who's never seen it.
Right. Well, it's nice talking to you, Will. It was nice talking to you tonight.
You too, Wes, as always. Thanks, folks, for joining us this week, and tune in next week again for Sasquatch Chronicles.
Brought to you by Audible.com. You know, we've been talking a lot lately about government cover-ups. Why would the government be interested in cryptic creatures out there, cryptozoology, cryptic creatures? And I came across this fascinating article that discussed the subject. And I found that not only is the government interested, but they've researched a lot of the cryptic creatures out there, the mysterious creatures. Back in 1947, the Philippines were being taken over by this rebel army. So the Philippines came to the United States and asked for assistance. The U.S. Army said that they would help. They kind of assessed the situation and decided if we send in troops, there's going to be a high casualty rate. But what they had found is in the Philippines, there is a kind of a mystical creature. It's a vampire, kind of like our Bigfoot, but it's a vampire. Most of the natives are scared of this vampire. The U.S. government decided they would send in 8 Special Forces guys. And what these 8 Special Forces guys did is they went into close to the rebel camp, and they would always go in at night, and they had created this special weapon that looked like 2 puncture wounds. They would grab one of the guards, basically get him in the jugular. The guy would bleed to death. They would go back out into the forest, hang him up so all the blood would drain out of his body. Then they would take his body back to where they had found it. The rebel army would find it, and they had spread kind of these rumors that this vampire was in the area. So the rebel army would back off from that area. They would kind of back off 20 miles from that area because they were afraid of this creature. Well, the Special Forces would go back in the next day, the next night, grab another guy, do the exact same thing, and then dump his body off. And pretty soon they got the rebel army to back off farther and farther and farther. And so the Special Forces of 8 men were basically taking over this island. They had taken back all of the strategic positions that this rebel army had left, had deserted.
Yeah, it's a psychological weapon, or psychological warfare.
Yeah, psychological warfare. And they basically had defeated this rebel army with just 8 Special Forces guys doing this, killing these soldiers that way.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit. When I was in the Army, part of my job was to go out. We were, cavalry, sort of a buffer between main line units and an enemy. And a lot of times what we were to do was to go out and make an enemy think, this is training, of course, but make them think we were the main force. That way, higher level commanders could maneuver, because we were not only seeing where an enemy was, but we were messing with them, making them think we were a big force. I'll give you an example. We had one time a whole British infantry battalion, about 500-600 guys, all their vehicles, and they would want to sleep in the evening time, so they would be moving into tree lines, setting up their positions. We had 2 armored personnel carriers and 1 tank. We moved so often through back and forth. We pop our, pyrotechnics, and we'd back up and take off down the line and come back out. So they thought they were against the whole battalion, and there were only 3 vehicles. So that's the whole idea is, trying to psych out an enemy to make them think there's something going on that's not going on, and it defeats them oftentimes. So
3 vehicles stood up against a battalion?
3 vehicles and 6 guys. We laughed our butts off.
That's awesome.
They actually were going to dismount the whole battalion when we finally got a call to take off and go somewhere else.
That's hilarious.
It was funny. I mean, they wanted that tree line so bad, and we just weren't going to let them have it.
Yeah.
But, that's an old trick, long time, that the government uses, whether it's military or, I suppose, otherwise.
So I got a good cover-up encounter for you guys that I wanted to play. Story about a guy that shot a Sasquatch, reported it. Kind of an odd cover-up. But let me go ahead and play the encounter for you guys, and then we can discuss more on government cover-ups.
A rifle with me whenever I'm not bow hunting. I carry a 243 rifle with me. I got up, parked the four-wheel, got off the four-wheeler, and made about, went maybe 30 or 40 yards away from the four-wheeler. On the four-wheeler trail, I see quite a large human-looking footprint. So I'm looking at that footprint, and I just see one footprint, and I'm looking around, someone playing a joke, a prank or something, what in the world is a pretty good-sized human footprint in the snow here? And I could only see one. I looked at it for a couple of minutes and kind of just shrugged it off like, it's an anomaly in the snow or something. Maybe an owl come out of the tree and caught mice in the snow or something that just made it look like a footprint. But, I was just trying anything to explain it away from being a footprint. maybe 3 more steps down the four-wheeler trail, and I happen to look on the bank on the other side of the four-wheeler trail, and I see a second footprint. And I realize it's the opposite foot from the first footprint. So I went back to the original footprint, and I marked it off. It was 3 of my strides to the second footprint. And the second footprint wasn't a whole footprint. It was just the toes and the ball part of the foot. 3 more strides, and I could see then in the snow the trail of speaking of footprints. I'm like, who is up here barefooted in the snow? It's 15 or 20 degrees. I've hunted this area for 10 or 12 years and never had I ever run across a person in the woods. Nothing. I'm like, I'm going to follow these, footprints and see who it is. I followed them for probably approximately 100 to 150 yards. And it's winter time, so there's no foliage on the trees. All there's some little thickets that are still green. I get to close to a little thicket, and I can see that the strides have shortened quite a bit. They're not near as long as they were when I first found them. They're only about a stride and a half of mine now in between footprints. So I'm coming up on this little thicket, and I get within about 30 to 40 yards of this little thicket, and I hear a pretty heavy grunt. And I'm like, that's a darn bear. That's got to be a bear, because I've heard bears, grunting and snap their teeth when they're angry and stuff. And I think that's just a darn bear, So I took my rifle off my shoulder and engaged the shell. Got within probably 25 yards of the thicket, and I could see something in the thicket moving a little bit. It wasn't moving a lot, but I could see it looks like its upper body was moving, but not the lower part of the body. And where it was at in the thicket, I couldn't get a real good look at it, so I started moving around to the left of the thicket. It was hard it takes me back to that day. Kind of rough. And when I did, it grunted again at me, and now I'm within probably pretty darn close. I realize I'm too damn close, for a bear, and I'll put the rifle up, and I'll go ahead and, shoot it. So I pull the rifle up, and I'm getting ready to shoot, and I hear something to the left of me, and it sounded like something like a bear climbing a tree. I mean, it sounded like something that was really grabbing the bark of a tree. And I looked to my left, and I thought that it was a cub that was with maybe this sow or this bear and had ran up his tree. So I swung around to the left to look, and looking dead at me at about 30 yards is about a 5.5 foot tall, hairy man. That's all I could say. And he's got one arm, he's about maybe 15 feet into the tree, somewhere in that ballpark, and he's in a V part of the tree, and he's got his right arm is wrapped around part of the tree, and his left arm is out, and I can see his whole chest and legs, and he's only holding on to the tree with one arm, and he's got one foot in the V of the tree, and his left foot is kind of just pushed against the tree, and I can see this individual as plain as day, and he's black, black fur, long hair on him, and it made me, I was so scared that I came close to vomiting. I mean, it scared me that bad. At this time, I look back to the little thing. I'm backing up away from this tree and the little thicket. I realize that something is telling me that you're in a bad situation. Your instincts or your second sense or whatever you want to call it is telling you need to back out of this situation. So I'm easing back, and about that time, the big one, which was in the little thicket, which I thought was a bear, stands up, and it's a male. And the one in the tree I assume is a female, because it didn't have what I would say big breasts, but the one in the tree grunts at me. Well, when he grunts at me, I throw my rifle up and put the scope right on its chest, center mass of the chest. And I click the safety off and I let it go and busted it right in the chest. When I hit it in the chest, it didn't fall out of the tree, but it came out of the tree. When, after I shot it, I turned and started to run. And as I start to turn, I turn around and look, because as I turn, I have done ejected that shell, and I'm putting another shell in it, because I think that I'm going to have to fire at the big one. And I turn back and look. The big one is kicking the small one off the ground. And I can't believe my eyes, what I'm seeing. So I turn around and I'm seeing this big one pick it up, the small one up, and it picks it up like it's a rag doll. I mean, grabs it by its arm and just picks it up like, and this thing probably had to weigh 500 pounds. The big one, I would guess weighed 800 pounds, 900 pounds maybe. It was just a beast of an animal. Shaquille O'Neal don't have, it looks like a kid to this thing. So I turn, I see it, and I'm still wanting to get the hell out of there, And it turns and picks that one up, and it starts toward the rock cliff, the sheer cliff at the top of the mountain. And this big one grabs this rock cliff with one hand and picks itself and I don't know if it's its mate or a sibling or I don't know what it is, and carries them both up this sheer straight rock cliff like he was, almost like he was flying. It was like he didn't even have no effort to it. Just went straight up this 30-foot rock face in a matter of 5 seconds. I don't know if it was 5 seconds. Turning the other direction, and my ass is, I'm hauling tail back for the four-wheeler, which I'm only about, at the time I was probably only 150 yards away from the four-wheeler, something like that. And I run as fast as I can to the four-wheeler, and I keep looking back over my shoulder, wondering if this thing is going to come. And get to the four-wheeler, don't even bother. I've got the gun in my hand the whole time. Start the four-wheeler up, and I never saw it again.
Back to our encounter. Everyone here at Bigfoot Hotspot Radio would like to thank Audible.com. Audible.com is the internet leading provider of audiobooks with over 150,000 different titles to choose from. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot. And I want to thank Audible.com again for sponsoring the show. But let's jump back into the encounter. And this is where the story gets a little strange.
So I called the game warden and told the game warden that what had happened, and I told him that I didn't think that it was a bear. That I was pretty damn confident that it wasn't a bear. It wasn't in my mind. There was no confusion. I know what bear looked like. I've killed about 10, 11 bear in my hunting time in the woods, 20 or 30 deer, bobcat, coyote. I know what the animals are here in this area, and what I saw that day, the day before Thanksgiving on 2003, was not a damn bear. Was not a bear. I don't care what anybody says. The people can mock, make fun, say I'm lying. I don't care what they say. I know what I saw on the day before Thanksgiving of 2003. Part of it is strange, but this part became even stranger. Called the fishing game, and they said, listen, we'll send the game warden out. They probably tomorrow before he's there. I said, okay. He shows up the next day about, it's Thanksgiving Day. And he shows up Thanksgiving Day around noon, because we just got done. We ate a early lunch before we was going to Thanksgiving dinner, and he shows up. You know, he's not happy that he's here at my place on Thanksgiving. You know, he's like, buddy, let's get this done. You know, I want to be home with my family too. I'm like, okay, you know, it's what happened. I told him the story. Well, he starts writing down at first, and he's writing stuff down. And when I tell him about that, there's two of them, and that I believe it was a Bigfoot, he just stops writing, takes his notebook paper that he has, and just wads it up. I don't have time for this stupid shit. You know, I won't be home with my family. You probably saw a bear. You know, we get these reports all the time that people think that these things are out there. You know, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, buddy, if that's what you think, it's fine with me. I said, I just wanted to make the report that I had shot an animal, you know, in case another hunter finds something dead in the woods that, you know, that I shot, and I have a bear tag, you know, and that I can tag the animal if someone recovers it. So he's like, well, where did this happen? I said, it's up the mountain, you know, probably about a mile up the mountain. He said, well, would you take me up there on your four-wheeler? I said, not a problem. He said, was there blood? I said, I don't know if there's blood. You know, I said, when I shot the one in the tree, you know, my ass was headed the other direction. You know, I put the round in it and turned around, and all I done was turn around long enough to see the other one coming out of the thicket and pick the other one up, and then walk straight up a sheer cliff. I mean, just climb up a sheer cliff that no man without climbing equipment could go up, and much less carrying another individual that weighed at least 500 pounds up this cliff of 30 to 35, 40 feet straight up. This ain't a slope. This damn thing is straight up. And he's like, well, let's go. Take me to it. So we get on the four-wheeler and we get up there, and we stopped in the exact same location that I had stopped when the incident happened. And I showed him the footprints. He said, well, let's look. Where did these prints come from? And at the time, I didn't think about where they were coming from. I was wondering where they were born. So we tracked them back to where they had come from. And we went down the mountain, and finally the snow ran out, and it got into quite a bit of mud. And you could definitely see the foot. You know, in the snow you could see them, but in the mud, these things were just beautiful. I mean, they were absolutely great footprints. If someone wanted to cast them, those were the casts to make a cast out of. The game one's like, this ain't right. This ain't right. So he said, let's go back up. Let's go back up to where you shot this. Show me where you shot the animal. It's like, okay. And I didn't have a firearm with me when we went. And I said, sir, do you mind, you know, make sure you have a loaded weapon. I said, if we run across another one of these things, I said, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm unarmed. He said, don't worry about it. You know, it's not what you think. I'm like, okay. So we hike back up and we follow the trail of, you know, the footprints. That's where the little thick was at in the tree, and there is blood all over the ground in the snow. I mean, there's a good probably 2 or 3 puddles of heavy maroon, you know, and it looked like long blood in the snow. And I'm like, see, you know, I shot an animal here, you know, but without doubt I shot an animal. Well, he takes out a baggie that he has, and he's got a little thing around his waist, and he pulls out of like a Ziploc baggie, and he takes a handful of the blood in the snow, and he turns the bag inside out and grabs a snowball full of blood in the snow and seals it up and puts it in his back in his little sack there. And he said, well, show me where they went up the cliff, because you couldn't see because there was actually so many footprints. I guess where the big one had come out of the little thicket, maybe drug. It looked like that the other one had been drugged a little bit in the snow before it actually picked it up and climbed up the cliff with it. And it looked like it had drug it. You know, its feet had drug in the snow. It was like a skid in the snow. So we walked over to the cliff, and there was blood on the cliff, and there was actually looked like 4 fingers that were handprint on the rock, you know, that was blood. And you could see it pretty good, and he ended up taking a picture of that. took a picture of that. And then, we couldn't climb over the mountain. I mean, it's a sheer cliff. And I said, the damn thing went straight up this. And he's like, well, there ain't no bear that can climb that. I said, you're not telling me nothing that I don't already know, sir. I don't want to sound like a smart ass here, but I know what I saw and I know what I shot was not a damn bear, He's like, well, okay. If that's what you say, I believe you. I believe you. He said, you look pretty distraught and adamant that this is what happened. I said, well, I know what the hell happened. I don't have to prove it to you. If you believe me, that's fine. If you don't believe me, that's fine. That's your prerogative, your opinion, whatever, But I know what I saw. So he's like, well, take me back to my truck. He said, if anyone recovers a bear, we'll let you know. I'm like, okay. But we come back off the mountain, and he gets in his truck and leaves. He said, there may be someone else contact you over this. I said, from Fish and Game? He said, there may be another government agency that contacts you. I said, okay. And he said, well, who are they with Fish and Game? And he said, no, he said, there'll just be another government agency. He said, they'll introduce themselves if they show up. I'm like, okay. Which I thought was strange. He never left his card with me. Nothing. He leaves. So probably it goes maybe a week or 7 to 8 days, something like that goes by, and I have a shop here in town, and 2 individuals show up at my work and ask to speak to me, and both are in a government licensed minivan, and they said, we need to speak with you. And I said, well, what's this concerning, And they said, well, it's over the incident with the game warden. And I said, okay. They said, do we have somewhere private that we can speak? And he said, we'd personally like to go to your residence and speak to you. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, it's almost quitting time. You can just follow me home. So I said, just give me about 30 more minutes, and y'all can follow me home. So I finished up my shift, and they followed me home, which was 3 or 4 miles from my work is where I live. And they get out of the car, and they called me by my name and said, we need you to recount what exactly happened to you on the day before Thanksgiving. I said, okay. So I go through the whole thing. And one of the gentlemen was a clean-cut gentleman, had a suit and tie on, nice and polite. The other individual was a very large man, probably 6'8" or better, and he did not look like someone that would work for the government. He had long hair, kind of a scruffy beard, didn't look clean shaven. It wasn't clean shaven at all. Didn't look like a government employee would look. The smaller guy, he gets done, asks me the questions, and I tell him the whole story about what happened. And then the larger man says, well, do you really think that you saw was a Sasquatch? He didn't say Bigfoot. The whole time I never called it a Sasquatch. I said that it was a Bigfoot. And he said, do you think you really saw a Sasquatch? I said, I'm 100% positive that I saw a Sasquatch. He said, no, you didn't. And he was blunt. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. I mean, I know what I saw, and I'm pretty confident that's what I saw. He said, no, you're not understanding me. You did not see what you think you saw. And it would be in your best interest not to tell anyone else about what you think you saw. Upset me quite a bit. I'm not too tolerant to, someone telling me what I'm going to do. So I was like, well, I don't think that that's right. I know what I saw, and, I'm not, here to argue about it or anything. I know what I saw, and he said, well, all I can tell you is be in your best interest if you forget the incident ever happened.
In 1977, the National Security Agency, and you can find these documents, they've been released through the Freedom of Information Act, but back in 1977, the government was actually researching and doing a study on Bigfoot, on Sasquatch. And what if as you read through the documents, it's pretty interesting. They say in there, what if Bigfoot were to be real? What impact would that have on the United States economy? What impact would that have on forestry? What impact would that have on logging? Would we have to protect these animals? And in there, they even discussed, what if it comes out that these creatures are more towards human, more than animals? What if someone shoots one? Is that murder? So it was really interesting to read through some of these Freedom of Information Act documents that have been released. And it's even more interesting that the National Security Agency was taking note of Bigfoot back in 1977.
Now, isn't it interesting? Why would they postulate, if something like that existed, what effect it would have on the economy? Now, that's what I've mentioned before, and I'm going to put in my book, Creek Devil, on a chapter dealing with possible cover-ups, are a couple of different theories about why they would do something like that. One of those theories deals with, of course, the what I think is kind of the myth of the spotted owl, and it being either a test run to see what impact something like that would happen, if a species were, listed as endangered and logging had to be halted, what impact it would have on the surrounding communities. And it had a devastating effect. Of course, you guys live in a community that was hit hard by that. Or it could have been the actual vehicle to sort of take away that economy from those communities so that when the Sasquatch was proven, it wouldn't be as big an impact. I mean, I still think it'll be a huge impact, but I think that sort of softened the blow by kind of killing the logging industry. And, the thing that gets me is reading some congressional hearing information from, I want to say, 1990 or 91, and I'd have to look up the specific document. I have it somewhere here, but they were discussing this as all the various scientists and government officials, everyone, Forest Service involved with this whole spotted owl thing. And in the course of this conversation during this meeting, they were talking about a second species of owl that was plentiful that occupied the same habitat as the northern spotted owl. And to me, I mean, if the spotted owl was the only owl in that environment, yeah, I can see how if they died off, that would really change, the food cycle and everything in that environment. But it didn't. There was another species of owl, and they were actually discussing going out and killing this other species of owl to keep so the spotted owl could thrive. And
to keep the other one.
Didn't make any sense at all.
I remember that. They were actually going to kill one owl. They were going to kill one bird to keep another. Is what they were going to do.
Right. I mean, it's kind of silly. I mean, so so why even worry about the spotted owl? I mean, species, come and go. It's sad to say, but if your whole
I think what they were saying was the population was higher on the other one than it was with the spotted owl. But regardless, what is, like you're saying, what is the point?
Right. Well, their whole point was to say, okay, if we lose the owl, it's gonna have devastating effects on this ecosystem. Well, it wasn't, because there was already another owl there also eating the same things, doing the same kinds of things. So if the spotted owl died off, there would have been zero impact on that because this other owl was plentiful. So I had to think, okay, what were they really doing? And to me, it seems that, that would be a perfect vehicle to either blunt or test what the impact was going to be if the Sasquatch were proven real.
And, Will, I know we had that police detective that contacted the show. I know we're going to have him on here in the next couple of weeks. But while we're discussing government cover-ups, do you have the notes from when you spoke with him?
In the office he worked, they had a forest products deputy walked in and told him that he just left the Department of National Resources law enforcement meeting in Olympia, and that the lieutenant started off by telling the group about a Bigfoot sighting in Snohomish County the day before. I guess apparently the day before, so this was recent. The lieutenant told him that a woman and her grandson were on a short hiking trail and walked right up to a female Bigfoot on the trail who showed her teeth at them and growled. The woman ran back to her car and called 911. He said, I asked the deputy if he had the phone number from the DNR lieutenant. He did and gave it to me. I immediately called the lieutenant and advised him of who I was and that I was interested in Bigfoot, and he told me the name of the DNR cop who was assigned to the investigation. I called the DNR cop, who told me that he was looking into this with an open mind, but he had not started yet. He advised that the information that he had was that the woman called Snohomish County 911, told him that she and her son had just seen a Bigfoot face-to-face on said trail and wanted to talk to someone. Apparently, the dispatcher laughed at the woman, and after a few minutes of getting information, referred her to the DNR enforcement office. Said woman then called and left a very detailed message to the DNR message machine. The officer told me that everyone at his office had heard the message except him, as he had not been there, but according to his coworkers, the woman was very upset in the message because Snohomish County Dispatch laughed at her, and she was seriously suffering from anxiety due to the incident. And it was apparent in the message she left. He told me the location where it happened and said he would be going there later on that day after he listened to the message and called the woman. He told me that he would call me later that day and let me know what happened. I told him to give it to the woman, my number, and advised her that she could talk to me about the incident. He told me that he would. And he goes on. I got towards the end of my shift, and I had not heard from him, so I gave him a call. This was the detective talking to this DNR investigator. I called twice and left a message. About an hour went by, I called again. This time he answered. I asked him what he found out. He told me nothing. He said that by the time he got back to the office, the message had been erased from their phone system, so he had no way to contact the woman. I could tell in his voice that he was uncomfortable even talking to me. I asked him if he had contacted Snohomish County Dispatch, as they would have her information in the original 911 call recording. He told me that he would not be doing any further investigation into this, and then told me that he had to get off the phone as he was busy. The next day I called Snohomish County Dispatch, told them I was a detective from Mason County, I asked them about a complaint that had been filed on such and such date. That was a wildlife complaint from said DNR park, which was referred to DNR, Department of Natural Resources. They told me that they had no idea what I was talking about. I asked to speak to the shift supervisor. I asked the supervisor if they had been working on the date in question. They told me that they had. I asked about the 911 call, and they told me that there was never any such call. After that, I tried to call the DNR call back about 3 or 4 times. He never answered the phone or returned my call. Well, this was in the winter of 2010. That's from a police officer who, showed some interest in an incident. 911 calls, as far as I know, are never supposed to be erased because they can use those at any time in the future for legal cases and such. Because this was a Bigfoot incident, apparently these were erased from both the Department of Natural Resources and the original county dispatch office. So, this detective knew that there was a cover-up going on.
That's crazy. I've never heard of a 911 call being erased, and it's almost like it never happened.
Legal to. Yeah, I don't think it's legal to erase them.
I don't think it is either. But it's kind of like it almost never happened. They went through and erased everything and kept everyone quiet.
Exactly. See, that's like before when I told about the 2 incidents that I was involved in back in the mid-1990s, south of Mount St. Helens over by Goldendale, with the tracks that were washed out, and over by Mount St. Helens, in that area where tracks were also, gone, and people in Forest Service uniforms who nobody else in the Forest Service seemed to know. So there are definitely things going on, things being erased, disappearing, whether it's an active, I don't know if it's an active cover-up at higher levels. It could be just local officials who, don't want the notoriety for their particular departments or areas. I mean, it's really hard to tell at this point because we don't know. There are things being covered up.
So will we go out, we find a burial site, we dig it up, we find something. What do you think the government cover-up would be on that? Do you think it would be as big as an impact as actually finding a living, breathing thing?
Well, if we went out and, like I said, I know personally right now we're 8 in Washington, Oregon, where 8 sites are, and I have an idea where a couple more are on top of that. If we were to go out and take one of those apart and find a single tooth, and provided we were able to get wide enough exposure in the media so that they couldn't just come in and put a clamp on it, that would have every bit as impact as bringing an entire body in, because it's physical proof.
So what do you think about the economic impact of that? Would that be as large as well, do you think?
I do think it would be, because in some of the testimony, that congressional testimony I mentioned, they were discussing not just, controlling public lands, but there's some sort of a clause where they have, depending on the species and the impact and everything, without going into all the details, where they could even take over private lands. So that opens a whole can of worms right there. I mean, you start taking people's private property away, because that's the habitat of said species, then you're talking some real issues.
So we go out there and we do that. We dig up these grave sites. Are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot?
Well, it's possible, but it probably needs to be done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's better to give it to I think the public should have it. The public should have that knowledge. We pay for those lands. We pay for the government. We don't work for the government. The government doesn't own us. It's supposed to be working on our behalf, those of us that are the public. So anything on those public lands belongs to all of us in this country. We all have a right to know what's out there. And if we know that and it's widely disseminated amongst the population, then I think it's for us, the public, to decide what's to be done with that.
I agree with you on that 100%. I know that us three have talked quite a bit about going out and doing some of these investigation on these burial sites. I'm getting pretty stoked about it, and I know Wes is ready to go. It's a matter of fact, are the people ready for it too? Because if we do find something, like you said, too, we find some bones, which I don't think bones would last that long, but I don't know. It depends on how long.
I think teeth would be what we'd find, and some bone fragment.
Right.
My anthropologist friend is going to send me some information on soil degradation of tissues and things like that. He says, and I agree, a lot of especially in the Northwest with the rain and everything and the sharply different weather, the seasons, and the way these piles are, the rocks that are piled, there's a lot of air and water can get in through these sites. And one of the sites that has some really good mounds, it has about 9 mounds in it, is old because it's covered with moss. And, it takes a long time for the moss to grow in some of those places. So I'm kind of thinking we'd almost need a fresher site. So whether any of these sites produce anything, I don't know. All we can do is go and look and see what we find and continue to look for more of them, because I know there have got to be more of them, and I have a pretty good idea where we need to look.
If the Men in Black decide to come out and hassle me and Woody, you better send more than 3 or 4. It's going to take a whole lot more than 3 or 4 you monkeys in a suit.
It was kind of my next question to Will is he knows just about dead on where we live, Wes, you and I, pretty much within, 20 miles or something like that. Some of these sites Will was talking about are only 15, 20 minutes away from where we live.
Yeah, and you guys are pretty close to, you're about...
Why don't we get our ass out there and go do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you guys are a couple hours from about 6 or 7 of them, and you're about 20 minutes from one good one. Just due east of you guys, there's an area where I think there are some other ones. We need to get in there at some point and look, but I think there's some in there. And those could be fresher sites.
I'm ready.
Yeah. I know you are. He's been on me more, Will, than I've been on him, that's for sure.
And this is a good time to mention to our listeners about our sponsor, where if we had a big turnout from our listeners to help us out with our sponsor, we would have the necessary means to go out and really look for, not only check the sites we know we have, but to search for newer ones and fresher ones and really put the issue to rest.
It was really cool of them to sponsor the show, and I recommend everyone, it's up on our Facebook, but it's audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot. You get a free book, and you just sign up for your free trial. It doesn't cost you anything. I wanted to do something to where I know times are tough, people are struggling, and this is just 60 seconds of your time. It doesn't cost you anything to sign up, and it helps us out. I was hoping we could, if more people sign up and the sponsor works out, we could start producing more shows.
That's really the awesome thing about this particular sponsor is the audiobooks. I mean, I'm one of those people. I used to love to sit down with a book and read, and then people tease me at work about, because I bring in a thicker book, at least 1,000 pages all the time, because they were always too short. I'd get through them too quick, so I'd always look for these books that were much larger, but I just don't have the time in the past few years. And sitting down to listen to a book is, especially through your phone or tablet or computer or whatever, is a lot easier for people these days. And this sponsor, it's awesome because, you get to sign up for a 30-day free trial. It doesn't cost anything to help us. We're not asking for money, which, we've had people email us numerous times and say, we should ask our listeners for money. But I always feel uncomfortable asking people for money. And this is a really awesome way if you folks want to help us out. Sign up for the free trial. It's 30 days. You can cancel at any time. It doesn't cost a penny, but it helps us out. And like Wes said, we're talking about putting out 2 shows a week. If we get a lot of support from people and getting in the field, we can do some of these shows from the field, where things are happening right on the spot. That would be pretty awesome to, be out and record Sasquatches screaming for our listeners, things like that. So if we get enough folks to rally behind us on this, we could really increase the show and what we're doing for folks and really make this entertaining from the radio standpoint, but do some good work in the field too. It's sort of the call to rally our supporters, and we have a lot of folks out there, and we need every bit of support we can get to continue doing what we're doing and to make it even better.
All right, guys, have a good night. Will, Woody, have a good night. Everyone out there listening, have a great night.